USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, January 16th, 2023, where each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Family Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley.
Well, first of all, I don't know how we're going to top last week's show. To get the A+ ratings that we all got, Ed, you got it. I got it from Steve Metcalf. Jimmy, you were still a C. But for us to get A+ from Steve Metcalf, I don't know how we're going to top that this week.
I'm ready to put it on my resume and on LinkedIn. You know, that's high praise. I
mean, how often do we get an A+ from Steve Metcalf? He's our biggest critic. He listens every week, but we get A+, me and you. You were a C, Jimmy.
I might have been, gilding a little bit because I called Steve Metcalf right after the show and said, "Hey, we're going to criticize your league and outdoor games a little bit."
No, no. You were criticizing Steve Metcalf in the league, not Ed and I. We're awesome.
There you go. Well, Jimmy, here's your chance to redeem yourself. Let's start out. It was something you don't see all the time. 2 schools opened brand new buildings, Toscano Family Ice Forum at UConn, and I liked how they kept the Ice Forum name going with the new building, and Martire Family Arena at Sacred Heart. Both teams had close losses, I guess both overtimes in those, but nice crowds and atmosphere. Is this something they're going to be able to sustain? I know I've been to both Freitas a number of times at UConn, and I've been to Milford Ice Pavilion and whatever bank the arena is named after in downtown Bridgeport this year a few times for Sacred Heart. They've been building some crowds over the years, but is this something that's going to boost that and something they can sustain?
I think for UConn, yes. The answer is definitely yes. And a big part of that is, the fact that they've been drawing massive crowds in Hartford all season, actually more than the capacity at this building in stores. So I don't think that they're going to have a hard time putting 2,600 or so in every game at UConn. 4,000, I guess it's about a 3,600 officially seat arena in Sacred Heart. I think that that's a big ask because there's been games that they were in the hundreds in terms of fans when they were playing down in Bridgeport at the home of the pro team. So I think that might be a little bit more difficult, and you don't want to, just kill atmosphere in a big building. But I would hope being on campus that you're still able to draw better. We were talking before we got on the air, and we see it with Bentley. Beautiful new state-of-the-art building on their campus. They built it to the right size. It only has about 1,900 seats, but you don't see sellouts in there. You're still, maybe it's the fact that the team hasn't been great all year. But you were there a couple of weeks ago, Ed. I was there. You're talking probably about, I don't know what they announced, but when you're actually looking at fans in the stadium, probably about 900 to 1,000 a game. And so I think, that's halfway in that building, but 900 to 1,000 in Sacred Heart, that's about a quarter of the way. So you just don't, the one thing I don't love to see with these beautiful new palaces is a building that has no atmosphere. And that's what I get concerned about. I don't think that's going to be a problem at UConn, though. I know they're still going to play some games in downtown Hartford when they need even more capacity. But when they have 2,600 fans in that place, it seemed loud on Saturday night.
I think Sacred Heart needs an opportunity to develop that fan base because they've never had an arena on campus. They've never had kind of the high-profile games, and certainly Boston College in there to open it is a real help. For Bentley, I think part of it is it's been difficult this season. I've seen that building pretty full. Too bad the Falcons couldn't have played better at home after putting up 6 goals both games at Niagara over the weekend. But I think this is going to be good for both schools. And I think even though it's not said publicly, I think having a building of that size plays right into maybe some ambitions that Sacred Heart might have down the road?
Well, I think you bring up ambitions. Obviously, the worst kept secret is obviously they potentially looking at Hockey East and ambitions. But I think it all comes down to opponents. I mean, Ed, you've been doing this a long time in Atlantic hockey. This is the third building that I will have played Sacred Heart in when we play again. So you go back, they move from here to here to here. And I think Jimmy's right. I think they just need a place to put their stamp on and see if they can continually get big name opponents in there, but then get big crowds too. Open with Boston College, great. Good crowd. Opening night, everybody's all going to be excited about that. But how are you going to do against Air Force, Army, RIT, the name schools? Are you going to continue to draw those 3,000, 4,000 people for those? And then how are you going to do against the lesser known schools like, some of the names that people don't really put within hockey or big time schools. So you'll see over time, and it's all about getting the right opponent in there. It's all about getting those opponents that people are going to want to come see. They're going to have fun. And then will they continue to come back in those other games?
Well, hopefully they can build some tradition, some atmosphere, some promotions, get it to be a fun thing for the students to want to do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've been at Bridgeport, the 18 different names that it's called. There was no atmosphere there.
Right.
And that's not their fault.
Right.
I mean, you put 500, 600, 700 people in there and it's an 8,000 seat building, no atmosphere. You do it with 3,000 seat, 4,000 seat building. There will be something exciting there. And I'm looking forward to going to that new building. Bentley's a great building. Those are nice buildings and they did a good job on them.
I will say that it's good for Atlantic hockey to have another really high-end building in the league. You have RIT, you have Bentley, now you have Sacred Heart. These are all buildings that have been built since the teams entered the league. And I think that that's what you need. This league needs it more than anything, is the ability to really shine their facilities.
And I think, get back to UConn, building something a little smaller capacity than you think you might need is probably the way to go. That's been the trend in some of the newer buildings, is not to get oversized. Arizona State might have been able to build an 8,000 seat arena, 5,600 or whatever it is perfect because it's just slammed full and exciting in there. So you want to make it so that there's some sort of a demand.
But you also see, Ed, and we see it at RIT, and we talked about this before, just because you've got this new building doesn't mean everybody's going to be there. There are still empty seats because people are up at the club level or they're off in the restaurant and all that kind of stuff. You still need all the people to actually show up. It's just not the ticket sales for the environment that you want. And even the Coyotes, you look at the Coyotes sometimes at Arizona State and there's empty seats there, even though it's sold out. You need the people to get out of the club after the start of the period and actually be in the seats for the environment that you have. I mean, I don't know. You tell me. You guys go to all those rinks. To have a good environment, you actually need the butts in the seats, not up in the club level.
And you need the student section there, because the students, if you have an almost empty building, but you have a full student section that's allowed, you have atmosphere. And so when you have games that are during semester break, it's kind of hard to create that. So I think that in a situation like Sacred Heart, you get enough students in there. If they get 1,000 people in their new building and have a good student turnout and they're loud and boisterous, that's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, I'll give you Alfond Arena up in Maine. I mean, that's an old building. I get that. But when their student section turns out, it is loud, and you can be almost empty in the lower bowl, but you put those students in there and they're loud and they hang over the goaltender. I mean, that's the type of atmosphere you want. That kind of looks like in the student section at UConn, that's what they've built. There's some seats in the student section, but it's mostly an SRO type of atmosphere where it's almost like a big party for the students, and you're standing right over a goaltender. That's pretty fun. I got to say that's a design element I would have never thought of.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you go down to Penn State, which is a little bigger arena, but they built a steep student section that goes all the way up to the ceiling. And when that's full, that building is just super loud. So, and the atmosphere is great. So yeah, a lot of that's got to play into it. But anyway, terrific to have a new on-campus building that's state-of-the-art for UConn, and to finally have a beautiful new building on campus for Sacred Heart. Great for both programs. Let's get to some of the stuff on the ice. Denver got bumped from number 1 in the poll, the USCHO poll, last week with a loss to Alaska on Friday. Swept Miami, back-to-back 7-0 wins. Is this a statement for Denver? Is this a statement that Denver is really good, even though they've had some blemishes here and there?
Well, I think they entered this weekend with a chip on their shoulder. They didn't like the fact that their loss was kind of that beat them down, but that's why polls are polls, and the voters are usually taking a snapshot of what happened most recently, and most recently they had gotten a loss against a very good Alaska team. So this 7-0 back-to-back nights, I mean, they just dominated, and the goals were popping in from everywhere. That's a big weekend for them. And I want to conversely kind of look at Miami, and I remember talking to Chris Bergeron, and I think he had some concerns that the NCHC life is not that sustainable for them, and I don't know if this season, which has been a rough one for Miami at times, they've had some good wins on their resume, but at times a tough season for Miami. I don't know if struggles like this accelerate anything or do anything in terms of maybe finding a way to move this team into another league. The CCHA we've talked about a number of times. They used to be part of that league, and the geographic footprint of that league really kind of envelops where Miami is right now. So I don't know. It's a tough question, but they're really struggling right now. And this is a weekend that you kind of go back to your campus and just shake your head and say, wow, we got walloped.
Wow. You are just throwing all the controversial topics in, but you're doing it subtly. You brought up Sacred Heart and Hockey East. You bring up Miami and the CCHA. I mean, what got into your cornflakes this morning? I mean,
I think you were the one that brought up Sacred Heart and Hockey East. I made no mention of that.
Yes, you did a little bit.
Ed handed that off to you.
Yeah, I mean, like seriously, you're bringing up all we could do a whole show on all that stuff. So, but to go to your question, Ed, not to go where Jimmy brought it a little bit, to go to your question, those are the weekends you want to forget. Everybody always says polls are just people's opinion on a piece of paper and you can get rid of them. Obviously, Denver, they took it to heart and they went after it. It'll be interesting to see what the polls say, and if they have a hit list for the poll guys, because you guys all voted for Quinnipiac last week. So we'll see where it if they continue to go after teams and make a statement, because they did last night or the weekend.
I for the record, I did vote for Quinnipiac yet again. They were idle this weekend, but I did give them my first place vote again.
It's same here, and my hunch is that they're going to continue to be in first, but Denver's probably going to squeak ahead of some other teams, maybe into second place. It was also a big weekend for Michigan State. 2 overtime games. They took 4 of 6 points from Penn State to get back on track. Jagger Joshua, who had been brought up in a little controversy earlier in the season, he was the recipient, not the cause, scored 4 for the Spartans over the weekend. He had a hat trick in the 4-4 tie on Saturday. People talk about how Munn Arena is back, and it sounds like the Spartans are back too.
I watched part of the one game. Really good crowd. I think we talked about this last week, how it was going to be interesting to see where Michigan State goes. You want to talk about a little statement? They had a little rough patch. To do that, what they did at Penn State, shows that they're not completely out of it. Shows that they kind of want to hang around and see where they are on the bubble. Good for them. It was a challenging weekend for them.
And you're actually talking about fantastic crowds. I believe it was plus 6,000, more than 6,000 fans both nights there. And that's a fantastic crowd. An overtime win, a shootout win. What a fantastic weekend. And it did look like, just seeing the game winner from Friday night. and the crowd's reaction, it seemed like that place was electric. And I think that's fun. I know that's somehow Michigan State, Penn State has become a little bit of a rivalry in that league, or so their fans talk about it that way. But they banged that place out, and good for Michigan State. They needed that weekend. This has been, it's been a little bit difficult coming out of break. A lot of teams have hit this bump where you come out of break and you can't find your rhythm. You lost something that you had right before you went in. They got it back this weekend. They needed that big time.
You know what? It really looks different. Unbelievable what they did with the building, but it looks different to see Michigan State on the other side of the rink now. So they moved the benches this year, and I kept thinking the whole time, because obviously playing in the CCHA against them and watching your video of where you are in the game and then coaching there, to see them on the other side of the rink, it looked really awkward. I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And then I started reading about some renovations and saw pictures. It looks really like almost a completely different building there. So hats off to them for banging it out with 6,000 people and then kind of changing the feel and the look of the place a little bit.
Well, we're going to take a pause here. When we come back, we're going to talk about Derek's alma mater, Minnesota State, a big win for St. Thomas, plus Colorado College. And that's here on USCHO Weekend Review, sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Western Michigan, we talked about them last week on this podcast and also on USCHO Edge, which comes out on Fridays, talking about money lines and so forth. And we talked about under and over in that game. Maybe not so good on Friday, but my goodness, on Saturday, 13 goals between them. But Western Michigan just showed up and is just burying the puck.
It's a lot of goals. I mean, they've scored, I guess I don't have it here, but it's 16 plus 11. That's 27 goals in 4 games. They now have the nation's lead in goals per game. I mean, technically they're tied with Stonehill, but Stonehill's playing they've only played one Division I opponent all season. This is a legit offense, and if you want to see goal scoring, watch Western right now. They get up and down the ice. I saw some of, I guess it was Friday's game, I think it was. They get up and down the ice. That's a fun team to watch. I think that when you look at North Dakota, that was a difficult weekend for them, because I think a 3-goal lead on Saturday, they probably felt like they had a great bounce back after the loss on Friday. And then next thing you know, here comes Western. And, it went right down to the buzzer in regulation on Saturday. And after taking a 6-5 lead, North Dakota came back, tied it, but then Western found another way to score again. Derek, I know this program's near and dear to your heart as an alum, but wow, it's been a while since we've seen an offense like this. I think of like Jack Eichel BU as one of the last teams that could get up and down the ice like this Western team can.
Well, I think back even farther when you were talking there. I mean, first of all, I don't know if you have a better top line in the nation right now than what Western Michigan has. But I think back to before I even got to Western, Bill Wilkinson in about 1989, Wayne Gagne, a defenseman, was putting up 75, 80 points in a year. I mean, the numbers and the offense they're producing right now is something that is probably, like you said, unheard of. I mean, to have 27 goals in 4 games, that's almost 7 goals a game, and I mean, That's pretty good, pretty impressive too. Not sure there's a better top line in the nation. If there is, correct me, please.
No, I think right now you nailed it. That they are scoring, and when you look statistically at this team, we haven't seen a lot of big goal numbers, but Poland with 21 goals in 24 games. I mean, he's probably going to get to 30. And, if things really start clicking and they make a run in the tournament, could we see a 40 goal scorer in college hockey? We haven't seen that in too often in recent years.
I mean, is that Hobey Baker? Is he the favorite right now for the Hobey Baker?
I mean, you have to think that he's one of them. It's hard to think about favorites, this early, but for sure. I mean, it's not like this is Cale Makar, and you started the campaign in October, but they've got to start a campaign for him, because these are numbers we don't see every year. Total points, 33 points might not seem impressive, but 21 goals at this point. And it's not like he's just racking them up on the power play. 21 goals, he has only 4 of them on the power play. So he's scoring at even strength, and that to me always impresses me, when you don't have to really depend on the man advantage to get your points. He's really finding a way to score in a lot of different situations.
One of our better players, and you remember this, Cody Wido at 31, and I don't know if 31 goals. Think about that. I go back to when I was at Western. Colin Ward had 31 goals his senior year, and he was a second team all league. Way back when, 31 goals.
That was
now.
A different game back then.
Yes, yeah. He was second team all league. I mean, I had 27 points my senior year and wasn't even all league. That might be all American nowadays. 27 for a D. I mean, you go back. I mean, just think 31 goals, and now we're talking. He's got 21 still with 10 games left. I mean, he could be.
Yeah.
I mean, 40 goals, I think, is going to be tough, Jimmy. 40 goals is throwing it way out there, but he's got the ability to, maybe the way they're putting up numbers, hit 35.
Yeah, but and you make an NCAA tournament run, and he starts putting up a couple of hat tricks. But
that's all he does is get hat tricks too.
That's a pretty impressive way when you're. I guess sometimes Derek better than I would, but when you're feeling it as a scorer, you're feeling it. And
but what's he doing the rest of the games? Come on. I mean, in one breath I'm talking Hobey Baker, and then the other breath I'm saying, "Hey, come on, score more than just hat tricks, please."
Can't you get a little bit more, buddy?
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Minnesota State. They were at Arizona State for the weekend. They had some convincing games in a sweep. That puts Minnesota back into the pairwise conversation. It's been a little bit of a tough season for the Mavericks so far. Are they legit in the NCAAs? And bookmark Arizona State. We'll come back to them.
I think that the way that Minnesota State looked this weekend, that's a good positive. But now you've got to start putting it together and put together one. They've won 4 in a row. They swept Northern on the road. Now it's swept Arizona State on the road. But that was after getting swept by Bemidji, after getting swept by Ferris in early December. I mean, they've had signs of life, and they played Minnesota really tough in that first series of the year back in early October. I think that this team has all the tools. Now it's just finding the toolbox to hold it all together and bring that every night. That's the way I see this team. And it's so easy when you depended on goaltending for many years. Dryden McKay, Hobey Baker winner. That's what you've lost when you lose that. I think their style is still the same. They don't let up it much still, but when you don't know that goaltender is just an automatic to make a save, that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult as a team. So if they start getting some consistency in the net, watch out.
I thought you guys were going to go back to Dryden McKay in the NHL and all that again. I thought that's where you're going with Jimmy. I mean, that was last year. Last year was sponsored by DCU and Dryden McKay. That was your show last year. But I thought really that this was Ed's laughing. He's trying to mute it, but that was actually pretty funny. I really think that Minnesota State made a little statement. I think that they're still, maybe you talked about a chip on your shoulder. I think we've talked about Michigan Tech. We've talked about Bemidji. we've kind of forgot a little bit about them because they kind of are going through a tough time and just not as good as they were last year. Are they an NCAA tournament team? We will find that out. But I think that they're trying to find their way after losing that big class and losing their all-world goalie and trying to figure out how to go about that. So, like, really, you're trying to find an identity, and I think they did. And you want to talk about Arizona State. This may be a case of the hangover of Mullet Arena a little bit. Trying to also find their identity. You know, they had the identity of being the big school in a bad building and something to prove. Now they got the bells and whistles, and they're might be struggling with that a little bit.
That's difficult. I want to give you some goaltending numbers for Minnesota State. Keenan Rancier, he seems to be the guy that they've been going to of late. He has a save percentage on the season of .914, but this past weekend, .982. Over the last 2 weekends, .943, and over the last month, .943. So he's getting better. And I think that if that is the numbers that you're going to expect out of a goaltender, you know, night in, night out, that's getting back to a dependable goaltender. So I think that you might have seen, you know, where Hasty has found his goaltender, and now the team around it can be more comfortable.
Back to Arizona State. Right now they sit at 11-14. They have 12 games left on the schedule. Every game is a must win for them. They have an opportunity to pick up a little bit in the pairwise, hosting RIT this weekend. Then they have St. Thomas, and the rest of it is an independent schedule. It's really must win, and even that is precarious for Arizona State right now.
I don't think they have a chance.
No, I don't either, unfortunately. You know, you don't. They've run out of time. You know, Greg Powers, I think, with 26 games left. I think he told me 24, and they've had about 5 or 6 losses since then. So I think he understands where they are. They can put a great finish on this and maybe make a little bit of a run, but it's hard to think that they're going to get above that pairwise bubble.
Well, but we also go back to what we talked about last week with Fairbanks or Alaska.
Yeah.
I mean, they can play spoiler a little bit, and that's where it is. I mean, Fairbanks, Alaska needs to go out and run the table basically, but they need those wins, and they need Arizona State to do well too. So those are going to be some interesting games. Those have a lot of pairwise implications, actually, when you see Alaska playing Arizona State down the stretch.
Yeah, here's your comparison. Arizona State right now, they're 32nd in the pairwise. Alaska, they're 20th. 20 is manageable. You could get inside that bubble. It's tough. But 32, I just don't see it happening. That's way too big of a jump to when you don't have a conference championship game to fall back on.
Well, we mentioned the Tommies. St. Thomas got its first win over a nationally ranked opponent. They beat number 13 Michigan Tech in a weekend split. It seems like Rico Blasi has the Tommies right on schedule. They're making progress, getting more wins, playing better. It seems like he's got the program going where it needs to be.
Yeah, Rico, very good coach. You knew that they would get there eventually. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do what they started, and they took an ambitious schedule out. Being in Minnesota, you play all the Minnesota teams non-conference. There weren't a lot of built-in wins or attempted or 50-50 games in their schedule starting off the bat. Now you're seeing them just gradually win a little bit more. And I remember when we first started, and you always have milestones. Penn State has a board in their arena, in their locker room, of all their milestones. This is a milestone win over a ranked program. Now the next one will be a higher ranked program. Then it'll be a regular season title. Then it'll be home ice in the playoffs, regular season title. So this is just a check mark in their box. And congratulations to Rico. Good coach, good guy. No doubt that he was going to get there eventually and get the team playing the right way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Derek, on that, because, you know, when I look at their schedule as it's gone this year, and you said their non-league schedule has no cupcakes built into it. But they played St. Cloud tough. They played Penn State tough in one of the 2 games. That one went to overtime. They got hammered by Minnesota State, came back and lost 4-3 the next night. So they found a way to get themselves into games. Even this weekend against Michigan Tech, a very good Michigan Tech team, they lost just 2-0 on Friday, and then they came back with that 3-2 win on Saturday. So I think that we've seen Rico Blasi build teams up and do a really good job with what he did with Miami back in their heydays in the late 2000s. Culminating with a near national championship in 2009.
2 minutes away.
Yeah, last a minute, really, a little over a minute. I mean, they were a fantastic team, and I would expect that. It's a tougher road when you're building from scratch. Miami had a little bit more history when he got in there as the coach, but he's the right guy to do it. And you can see the progression they've made this season. Listen, they're still down the bottom of their conference. I get it, but there is still a team that you can tell in a few years they're not going to be sitting in the bottom of this conference for a long time.
Well, you go back to Miami, they capitalized on the new building,
right,
when Rico took over and built them to a national championship caliber team. We talked about them earlier in a little downward spiral a little bit, but that was the old CCHA. That was the Big Ten, blah, 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 blah. Now you see what Rico's doing in another geographical footprint and doing it in Minnesota too.
I would love to have a conversation sometime with Rico and ask him what 50-year-old Rico would tell 27-year-old Rico. And speaking of 27 years old, somebody needs to write a book or do some long form interviews and talk to 3 coaches who were 27 when they became head coaches that are in different generations: Jerry York, Rico Blasi, and David Carl. That would be an interesting topic to talk about and see what reflections each has on those different stages. One in the middle of his career, one retired, and one still very early on.
Well, I mean, even go back, like when I was the first head coach, I was 32 and I'm 52 now. We had a celebrity alumni game last night, and all of our alums are talking about how much I had mellowed and how much, I mean, we're in a different generation now. I mean, you have to coach different now than you did 20 years ago. And if you ask Rico when he was 27, I'm sure he was a lot more fiery. And I mean, the things you could say and how you could coach the kids are different completely nowadays than it was in 20 years ago. Absolutely.
We've talked to a couple of people who are head coaches now, who were assistant coaches, and talked a little bit about the transition from that. And a couple of the guys who had been longtime assistants said, a lot of the stuff I only used to do as an assistant, you have to do as a head coach now, getting to know the players a little more, getting a little more of that one-on-one and being more part of them as the whole person, something that may not have been as much a part of being a D1 head coach a couple or 3 decades ago.
No, it's changing. I mean, it's you used to tell somebody to run through the wall and they do it. Now they ask why and what's in it for me. And you've got to get to know them and have that relationship with them to get them to run through that wall for you. And usually back in the day, it was just like, hey, you do this, and they would do it. Now they ask more questions. Now they want to get to know you. And it's about communication. It's about building culture. I got that question from a couple of boosters last night. How are you going to build this different this time? Well, you have to get a good culture. You have to know the person. You have to know what makes them tick. And it's different than it was way back when. So, I mean, yeah, it would be interesting to have the conversation with Jerry York of what was different when he was 27 compared to now when he's 67 or now when he's older and go down the line of that. I mean, it would make an interesting book, Ed, but it is completely different, even completely different than 10 years ago.
Well, let's wrap up with one other young coach, and that's Chris Mayotte. Colorado College had a split with St. Cloud State. That moves them into 4th place in the NCHC. A little precarious. They're less than a game out of 2nd place, but they could drop all the way down to 7th if things don't go well for them. They're 29th in the pairwise, so they probably have to do very well in the NCHC and probably win it to get into the NCAA tournament. But this is a big step forward for that program. New arena, young head coach, building a culture again, as he's talked about. How about Colorado College and where they're sitting right now in that conference?
I'll tell you, I was positive that Chris Mayotte would do a good job for Colorado College. He was a very successful assistant coach, no matter where he went. But I don't know if I thought he would do it this quickly. This is really impressive. When I'm I was kind of looking over the scores on Friday night. There it was, another win, this time against St. Cloud State. And I looked at where I said, okay, let me see how far are they out of a home ice spot? And I looked at it, I said, whoa, they're tied for second place right now. Now they lost on Saturday, and they're now, I think, 2 or 3 points out of second. But that's unreal that in this quickly, Chris Mayer can go in there and really transform this team. It was bad, and I actually got along with Mike Havland pretty well. I thought he was a nice guy, but he was a professional coach, and I don't think he really fit in that CC locker room. What I've been told by people that worked in and around him, that he was never the right fit. And I thought that it was it was a program that you could get back on the tracks, but it's hard to get back on the tracks in, say, the NCHC than it was maybe in the old WCHA. You could have some down years and then bounce back, and Scotty Owens did that many times. But I'm just really, really impressed in the NCHC that Chris Mayer can make this team so competitive so quickly. You can't, if you take a period off against this CC team, you might as well just chalk up a loss, because they seem to play 60 minutes every game, and that's what makes them tough.
I think it goes on the same stage that we talk about with Denver sometimes, because of the time change, because of everything you forget about.
Yeah.
And you forget how they're doing. Now, you tell me that they're in the top 4. I noticed that a couple times, that they're up, they're doing better. They're out punching their weight class. But if you have to buy or sell, which we haven't done in a while, are you buying or selling on this being sustainable this year as a home ice team in the first round?
Ooh, that's tough. We'll bring back buy sell next week just for that reason, but I'll hold off my answer until then. How's that?
Oh, come on. Ed, buy or sell on a home ice on CC right now?
Oh, I got to think of, if somebody put a gun to my head right now, I would say buy right now. I like where they're going, but it's a unique situation there too. And you go around college hockey, you've got Big Ten schools, you've got tiny private schools. You've got Colorado College, this beautiful campus, 2,000 students. They have a unique academic situation where instead of taking several courses, you take one class in a block for 3.5 weeks. They've got a jewel of an arena at Ed Robson Arena, perfect for the size of the school. Everything's going well there. If you can make the right case to the right player for the kind of college experience they're going to have, there are players out there who want the big school atmosphere. There are players who want the small school, more intimate thing. There's something really compelling there, and it should be a good situation for him to continue on recruiting. He's got great goaltending. I mean, everything is going in the right direction there. So I'm leaning by.
I believe it's a liberal arts school, so you have to find the right person. You have to find the right person with a block plan too that wants to do that. I've heard, obviously, when I was at Air Force, I heard a lot about Colorado College and the negatives of the block plan and the negatives this, negatives that. Unbelievable location. I mean, you guys have all been there. Unbelievable location. Great town. Great arena. I mean, you got to find the right person, just like you do for everything. But I'm not sure that this is the home ice year. I'll leave my answer. I'm just not sure yet. I'll know more next week.
So buy, sell, I don't know.
Yeah, buy, sell, I don't know. But I think they might be a year away. To be determined. To be determined.
We're going to rename the segment next week. Buy, sell, I don't know. But here's what I'll give you for an answer to that, Derek. St. Cloud and Denver, they're going to have home ice. That I feel pretty confident in. I feel like Western's going to get there, but whose expense is that going to be at? Colorado or Omaha? Colorado College or Omaha? I don't see North Dakota pulling things together. I don't see Minnesota Duluth pulling things together. I do see 5 teams really battling for 4. So that is where that's why I almost want a little bit more time to make that decision. But I feel like I'm with Ed, that I think that if you had to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say yes.
Ask me again next week. Could we do that one? Buy, sell, ask me next week.
Yeah. Next week, we'll do a whole show on things where we don't know anything about them.
But people say that all the time about us.
People right now saying, isn't that every week?
People would say that usually every week.
Well, with that, we'll wrap things up. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Family Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.